Well, good morning. Welcome to the June 2nd, 2023 SANDAG Transportation Committee meeting. And I will now allow the meeting to, call the meeting to order. And before I start, I would like to ask the interpreter how to access interpretation. So Carlos, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Xu. I will begin with the instructions in Spanish, and I will be back with the instructions in English. Muy buenos días y bienvenidos a esta sesión del Comité de Transporte. Como es costumbre, se está ofreciendo interpretación simultánea para hacer uso del servicio. Si nos acompaña vía Zoom, favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla, hacer clic en el icono de interpretación, parece un globo terráqueo, y seleccionar Spanish o español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom en celular, tableta, etc., presionaría primero los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego su idioma. Once again, interpretation is being provided to and from Spanish. If you are joining us via Zoom, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you should see an interpretation icon. It looks like a little world, and then you would select English as your language. If you are joining through the Zoom mobile app on a cell phone, tablet, or other mobile device, you would first press the ellipsis, the three dots, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Ahora, si nos acompaña presencialmente en la sala de juntas de SANDAG y necesita interpretación, por favor diríjase a la recepción y solicite un receptor. Este parece un pequeño iPod y lo puede utilizar para escuchar la reunión en español. Simplemente sostiene el auricular junto a su oído y la interpretación comenzará automáticamente. Now, if you are joining us at SANDAG and need interpretation into English, please check out a headset from the receptionist. The headset looks like a little iPod and comes with an earpiece, which you can use to hear any Spanish comments or questions translated back into English. You simply hold the earpiece to your ear and the interpreter will come on automatically. Gracias, and thank you, Mr. Xu.
Thank you, Carlos. Next, our clerk, Francesca Webb, can you confirm that we have a quorum by calling the roll call?
Thank you, Chair. North County Inland is absent this morning. For South County, Councilmember Duncan.
Present.
And Councilmember Rodriguez.
Present.
For, the City of San Diego and the County of San Diego are both absent. For East County, Chair Xu. Here. And Councilmember Mendoza. Here. For North County Coastal, Deputy Mayor Zito.
Present.
Metropolitan Transit System is absent. For North County Transit District, Mayor Pro Tem Bhat Patel. Here. For the San Diego County Regional Airport Authority, Mayor Sanchez. Present. And, Councilmember Perez.
Present.
For the Port of San Diego, Vice Chair Naranjo. Present. For Caltrans, Executive Director Gallardo.
Here.
And the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association is absent. We do have for MTS, Sharon Cooney is here. And for NCTD, Chris Orlando is also present. And we do have a quorum and we're ready to begin.
Thank you, Francesca. We'll now take public comments. So Francesca, do we have any members of the public who want to make any public comments?
Yes, thank you. We'll start with the folks in the room. Tim Bilaashka, you can come up to the podium, and then we'll go to Blair Beekman on Zoom.
Good morning, Transportation Committee. Dr. Timothy Bilaashka up in the Del Mar Mid-County coastal area. I just want to mention two things that may be dear to the heart of Jack Xu. We are not paying any attention to particulate matter. And it's becoming clear that that is a health toxicity, and we don't have enough monitoring it. And so I want to encourage, we need a lot of money to understand, particularly less than 2.5 micron, 1 micron ranges. There is some state funding, I think, in the 2.5 to 10 range. It's inadequate. We're not doing the job. The second thing, I'm becoming more aware of the role of agriculture in climate change. And we are not measuring the need for water sequestration. The soils are becoming hard for many reasons, especially when you dig big projects and build on the coast. It apparently destroys the microbes in the soil. These are types of fungi that nourish the plants. And so the water runs off instead of collecting up to 10 inches per hour in a given area. This can be done in micro batches. It doesn't have to be huge projects. But water vapor is a huge contributor to global climate increase in the temperature and the problems with water coming down all at once. And then I just want to mention, and I apologize, I don't have the names in my head at the moment. It's been a long week. A lot of the people we put on the committees at the federal level and making administrative judgments are really just lobbyists for each of the industries, and particularly the Petroleum Institute. We should not be subsidizing fossil fuels. We should not be digging for gas offshore. We need to get off of producing not only the CHG, which we're not meeting those standards, as I understand it, even the state has reproduced in this last month, but we're not even doing that well. And we're going to pay the price if we don't spend some more money figuring out how to sequester the carbon, but also the water. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Blair Beekman, who will be followed by the original draw.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. My Zoom connection may not be very good today. So, well, at least for this time. So if I go in and out, have a little patience to return. And if it doesn't return, well, what I cannot fully finish at this time, hopefully I can at the bond issue. A bond item coming up sooner. What I wanted to going on for MTS drivers, the issues of bus drivers calling in sick has been a really serious problem for years now, and it seems like. So I hope what you're working on with that not only address money, break time. Not only that, but work to really address how to stop them calling in sick in the future. They have a really serious habit of calling in sick and missing routes. How do we end that? Double efficiency within the SCMTS system, which I think is miraculous thinking. And we have the capability to do that in San Diego. Places like San Francisco, Muni, and the system around the area, they're having budget financial problems. Places like LA Metro are not. And I don't think San Diego is quite in a fiscal deficit position so much to be fearing. I think we can work proactively towards things. I hope you can work with this union strike going on right now to not only give drivers their needs of better pay and better break times, but then proactively work to, on top of that, give them incentives that they want to not call in sick again, and that we're running buses more frequently in the future. How do we bring all of that together? I think it's an important task that you have here at SDMT, here at SANDAG, to help negotiate that process. As I'm reading that TransDev, the agency that works, that is the bus operator company, they're not being so negotiable at this time. So SANDAG has an important mediation role to, build these better good things. Good luck how to be doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final speaker on this item is the original draw.
So I'm wondering why MTS in San Diego County and City aren't there a lot of the time. So I don't know how you can get representation from those areas when they're never at the meetings. But, Dr. Bilaashka was talking about, particulate matter. But what I want to know is, do you guys know that there's a geoengineering project happening above San Diego, and it started in February of this year and it's going to go to February of next year? Where they are actually using nanoparticulates and different things. above us. And I think that's something that you guys should be aware of as you sit there and worry about climate change, because there's things happening above us that are actually not good for us as human beings to ingest. So whether it's from a plane that is just flying and has jet fuel, or chemtrails, or different things that they use above us to affect and manipulate the weather, it also affects the bees and the birds and all of the and things that help continue to produce lively plants and greenery. So, if you're not aware of that, I think you should look into it, because it is happening and it is affecting all of us. And if you're worried about all of the climate change and like getting, the place to where the people could breathe fresh air, you should think about that. And this whole thing that you guys are doing, I don't know if you've also heard about what's happening in the UK with the 15-minute cities, but all of the agendas that you guys put forward are in line with that. And I mean, that's where the vehicle miles travel tax comes in, because it's going to keep people from going outside a certain zone. So, I mean, if you're not aware of that and you're ignorant of that, but you're pushing this and you're not sure why we say that, I would definitely look into it, because it would behoove you to understand what you're pushing and what that even means for you, because you can't go outside of that 15-minute city unless you have a permit, and you can only get so many per year. So if people want to see their family, they're not even able to do that. And so if you're not aware that that is something that you are engaging in with all of these agendas to get us to ride public transit, live in densely populated areas, walk or bike, not drive. I mean, your whole even electric vehicle plan isn't going to work, because the power grid cannot sustain it. And it's already been stated, yet you guys continue to push it like somehow there's going to be some fix in the power grid that's going to allow people to be able to charge their cars in the summer at the same time as using an air conditioner, when we already know what happened last summer, and like we're up to it again here. So I'm just coming to you as if you're ignorant. And so I'm hoping that you're not, but if you are, please look into these things, because those are in line with what you're doing. And you should be aware of that. And if you already are, then tread lightly, because it's not going to work. And it's very dangerous to do that to the people.
Thank you, Chair. That concludes the public comments on this item.
Thank you. Are there any member comments, general comments from members? Ms. Nava, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Shu. I want to make a couple of quick comments. One is announce the appointment of Nikki Tionko as the corridor director for our South County Trade Corridor. Nikki is here with us today, and thank you for that. And her appointment is effective as of yesterday, June 1st. Nikki is in charge of most of our routes in the South County, including Interstate 5 from downtown to the border, State Routes 905, 11, 54, 125, and Interstate 8 in the metro area. So Nikki's been acting in this spot for a few months, so she's not a stranger to the corridor. And she basically fills a spot that was vacated by Mario Orso when he became our chief deputy. Now, Mario and I will continue to be engaged with the negotiations related to the Otay Mesa East port of entry, but Nikki is your best friend if your jurisdiction is in those routes. The second thing that I wanted to mention is that Colleen and I attended a safety summit earlier this week in Sacramento, and that safety summit was to gather all the agencies in the state, local, federal, and state agencies, to talk about the number of collisions and fatalities and serious injuries that we have on our public roads, both at the local roads and the state highways in our state. The numbers of deaths are staggering. We're up to 4,400 deaths per year on our California roads. That's an average of 12 deaths per day. About one of those are here in San Diego County. Also in San Diego County, in addition to one fatality per day, approximately, we have another 3 people that are severely injured every day. About 2/3 of those happen on local roads, and 1/3 of those happens on the state highway system. So it's incumbent upon all of us to do everything we can through design, technology, public education, to try to get these numbers down to 0 by 2050, which is our vision 0. Now, the 4 most prevalent causes for deaths and serious injuries in our county. Number one is lane departure, people not staying in their lanes and either exiting the highway, going over the side, or going to an adjacent lane where they cause a collision. So lane departure is number one cause. Second cause is aggressive driving or speeding. Third cause is impaired driving. And tied for four are collisions related to bikes, peds, and motorcycles, where actually our peds have a disproportionate number of deaths and injuries to our lowest income people in the county. So we have to, the data is important because, like I said, we have to put our best effort together with our local agencies and our regional partners here to try these numbers down to zero. So I'll leave it at that for now, but more in the future to come when we address safety on all of our projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Duncan.
Thank you. Just a very brief comment. Coronado's having an event on Saturday, June 24th, and I thought someone here and listening may be interested. It's called the Low Tide Ride and Stride, and it's on June 24th. We had about 700 participants last year. It's put on by Coronado Rotary to raise funds for wounded warriors and for wounded first responders. But it's a great event where the tide is low enough where you can actually ride your bike on the beach right at the shoreline. And it's a 5K, so we have a lot of runners as well. But if anybody's interested, you can just Google Low Tide Ride or go to lowtideride.com. But it's a great event. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from board members? If not, we'll go to Colleen Clemenson with a report from SANDAG.
Thank you, Chair Shu, and good morning, everyone. I just wanted to follow up on what Director Gallardo talked about, which was the statewide safety forum. And I think probably the most important thing that came out of that is that it should not be an acceptable outcome of using the transportation system that a fatality is okay. I think that's really what it comes down to. And this committee, as well as our board of directors, have adopted a strategy for Vision Zero. We were able to get $2.5 million of federal funds so that we can put together a region-wide strategy for how we address safety, not only on the highway system, but also with local streets and roads. There's also the City of Vista, who we'll be working with, who will be doing a specific City of Vista Vision Zero plan. And then the La Jolla Band of Mission Indians also has a grant. So we'll be working on all of those, bringing updates here to you all. I learned a lot in that workshop about the different mechanisms that we can put in place to really help address safety. Part of it comes to, making sure that we have separated facilities for pedestrians and bicyclists. And a lot of it comes down to speed. I think that's the thing that we learned as well. So more to come on all of that. We will engage all of you and certainly the communities in the importance of that. A couple of other things I wanted to mention: that we recently celebrated National Infrastructure Week. In fact, at your last meeting, we had a press conference on that after the or kind of during the time that your meeting ended. So that was exciting to be able to celebrate all the different projects that the region is getting funding from the state and local level. Really, this is what's happening in the Low-San corridor as well as Otay Mesa East. We brought this up at the board meeting last Friday, and Councilmember Duncan said, we need to know about when these press conferences are happening. So we'll make sure that we get the word out when we're having press conferences. As long as we know in advance, we'll share that with you all. So wanted to make sure we followed up on that. We're working hard to get the other part of the funding for the San Dieguito Bridge in the Low-San corridor. So we got half from the state roughly. And so we're working with the Federal Rail Association, making sure that we're in good standing and ready to receive that money so we can get the bridge constructed as well as the platform in Del Mar. Just a couple of other things to mention as part of our Smart Corridors project. So that's where we're really looking at how do we make the investment in our roadways actually work better than they do today. That's deploying technology. And it's also making sure that we have as many facilities as possible for electric charging. And so we've got a whole program, and we're going to hear more about that as one of your agenda items today. But one of the things we're doing is starting a shuttle service in Pacific Beach this summer that will help. It'll be a neighborhood electric vehicle that will help circulate from the mid-coast stations into Pacific Beach. And we're also doing one in Oceanside. Yes, Mayor. So that is exciting. The last thing I wanted to mention is that we are going to be bringing an item back to the Transportation Committee and then to the board about the process that we use for awarding grants for specialized transportation. I know that was a big discussion at your last meeting. It was a topic as well at the board of directors. So the process for the grants, but then also just what are we doing as a region to seek additional funding for this important part of our transportation system? So the people who have the least amount of access to transportation to make sure that they have access, whether you live in a rural area or in the urban areas, and how you can get around to get to goods and services. So we will be bringing that forward. We're going to take that to the board. There was a lot of discussion at the board of directors as well on the importance of that funding. So we'll start here with the Transportation Committee and then take it forward. And that concludes my report, Chair. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do we have any public comments on the reports?
Thank you, Chair. We do have two public comments. Blair Beekman, you can go ahead, and then Blair will be followed by the original draw.
Hi, thank you. Boy, really nice to hear that you're developing a shuttle for the Pacific Beach area. The way the 8 and 30 works, it sometimes is a bit of a schizophrenic relationship in how to get a bus. And hopefully the shuttle service will do a really good thing. Thank you. I also wanted to quickly mention Vision Zero things and the importance of your Vision Zero work. We had the mayor of Guadalajara here last week at SANDAG. And SANDAG is, in Guadalajara, Vision Zero ideas, 4-day events about just bringing the public and community together in fiestas, in shopping areas, shopping mall areas where people can shop, they can do their government service and health needs. It's a real community effort. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So the mayor of Guadalajara being here last week really should emphasize what Vision Zero can be working towards. In America, we're gonna focus on law enforcement stuff a lot. When you do, and it's technology, really try to concentrate on open public policies and accountability practices, and that it's a combined effort. That's in America how we can talk about a good community harmony and ways to think of Vision Zero that I think can be enjoyable and people want to work towards. Thank you.
I think your next speaker will be the original draw.
You guys in your
Fucking world.
hello.
Excuse me, pardon me.
Okay.
That we're going to
That
reset
was,
so you can
yeah,
start.
thank you. With the whole Vision Zero, it's like anytime you want to go to zero for something, obviously it sounds nice, but these are things that you guys will never have full control over. Like just when you're talking about the whole driving thing, lane departure, aggressive speed, and impaired driving, the first three things, you're never going to necessarily be able to mitigate unless you have full control over the people. I was hit by a drunk driver who was also high on PCP, who went over the lane in the rain, speeding, and hit me head on. So, even if you had an electric vehicle, there's no way that you're going to stop that from happening, especially in a rural area where lanes are 2 lanes. And how are you going to keep people from drinking and doing PCP? You could do all the things that you want to try and do to help, but at the end of the day, unless you have full and complete control over every single person's bodily autonomy, their driving and be able to manipulate the vehicle to drive the way you want it to. Even if you're walking, it's like these things, we can't go to zero. They're impossible. And, the more that you try and do it, the more you use these things to say, take control over the people and tell them how they need to live by saying, you're going to drive all electric vehicles, or you're going to take the bus, or you're going to walk, or you're going to live in this densely populated area, because that's the only way to do it. I mean, it's like all these rules and regulations that come forward that take away the freedoms of people, all under the guise of safety. And it's like, even though I was hit by a drunken high driver, I don't believe that anything that you're going to do is going to keep that from happening if you had implemented it before. I mean, you can't you mitigate things even like weather. So, I mean, well, people do, but not, you guys can't. But you get all this funding and whatnot, and the things that actually should be taken care of aren't. I mean, it's like, you want MTS drivers to drive, give them a bathroom. Don't just make them retain their urine so that they have health issues. And then as well, people that ride the transit don't have anywhere to go either. So it's like, you have all this money and you want to get $2.5 million to, do a strategy to address safety. And that's what happens. You guys get all this money to, create these programs to address certain things, but the real issues don't get solved, because then all of a sudden you don't even have money to mitigate that. But you have money to mitigate a whole program to go and collect data and go and do this. It's like, it's a bunch of busy work, and it's a waste of the money that the people work hard for, that you guys take, because it doesn't matter if it comes from the federal government, the state, or local, it's all from the people. Okay. And they all work really hard for that. And it just gets wasted frivolously, like, it grows on trees.
Thank you. Our final speaker on this item will be Ellen Falls. You can go ahead when you're ready. Ellen, you are self-muted at the moment. I'm going to try and reach out to Ellen.
Okay.
There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you can go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. I thought you were controlling my mic. First of all, I want to thank SANDAG so much for all the great work you've done for cycling and pedestrian safety. The new lane markers, widening of corridors for pedestrians and cyclists, the underpasses. I mean, everything's been really, really awesome, and I so appreciate it. It's like night and day from 10 years ago. But yesterday, a new item has come to my attention that I think is a really important corridor. My husband and I have been traversing between Oceanside and San Clemente for many, many, many years. I don't know, 20 years on either a regular ID, via a driver's license or passport, or a Defense Department issued ID, as they were conducting over the last maybe 6 years, where they did a full background check and you got a year pass if you chose a year pass, or you could get a 3-day pass if you were just a tourist coming through. Lots of touring cyclists pass that corridor because it's the only way to kind of stay on the coast and have a safe travel along the California coast, which is a really popular route for visiting touring cyclists from all over the world and the country. And yesterday we found out that Camp Pendleton, once your pass expires, because we went to renew ours, they are no longer issuing passes. The whole program is stopped. So when your pass expires, you're done. And they stopped apparently about 4 months ago. Of course, we didn't know it then because our passes were good for a year. And as all of us time out, suddenly there will be absolutely no safe way to travel between Oceanside and San Clemente or up and down the coast except on I-5. And no one's going to be riding a bike out there. And I just feel that it's, yes, a huge monumental project to undertake for SANDAG and any other agencies, but it looks like that's something that maybe needs to be considered now, because all of a sudden this whole corridor is cut off to anything but motorized traffic. And so anything that you can do to put it on your agenda to start looking into, because it looks like maybe the only, of course I have no idea, I'm just making assumptions, but it looks like maybe the only possibility would be to have a pathway that goes along.
Ellen, I'm sorry to cut you off there. Your time has expired. And Chair, that does conclude the public comments on this item. I did want to mention for the record that during the last item, Chairwoman Pinto joined the meeting.
Great. Thank you. Do we have any member comments or questions? Mayor Sanchez.
Thank you very much. I wanted to say a few words about our shuttle program that we're really excited about working together with SANDAG on this. It was SANDAG and also Visit Oceanside also is contributing towards this. And it's still a pilot project. We did, this is year 2. Year 1 was less than a year. This is going to be year round. And we also are starting at $3 per ride, but with direction to staff to see how we can do this cost neutral in terms of, the city's costs. And we've actually been asked to expand the area to include a senior center, which is, right next door. So it's something that we probably could do, but it's interesting that we're getting more residents. Of course, we started in as an idea to try to move tourism, tourists around without having to, get out the car and drive for a short period of time and try to figure out how to find parking, right? Which probably would take longer than the ride. So this is really exciting, and we're hoping that the data that comes out of it will be, good for the entire region, if not, the whole county. But we're very, very excited and want to thank you for the support.
Thank you. Any other members? Comments? Great. I hope we do, just as comment from me, it's just I hope we do pursue other means to provide traffic safety. I think 12 deaths a day is a pretty shocking number, and that we need to really address. Let's move on. So item number 3, do we have any members' questions on the minutes from the 19th? If not, I could entertain a motion to move and approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as
Moved
stated.
by Councilman Duncan,
Second.
seconded by Brett Patel. Any other? I think you can still vote. Right?
You can vote, yeah.
Okay, so I have a motion by Duncan and seconded by Brett Patel for item number 3. We go ahead and vote.
That motion passes unanimously with those members present.
Great, let's move on to item number 4. Item 4 is the Transnet 2023 series bond issuance. And we have the CFO, Andre, here to kick off the explanation and presentation.
Thank you, Chair Shu, and good morning, members of the committee. So we were here just 2 weeks ago as an informational item for this bond issuance, but today we'll actually be looking for a recommendation that we can take this item to the board for approval. So with me today, generally when we do these bond issuances, we assemble a financial team. So I want to introduce the team that's sitting with me today. On my left is Jonathan Goose. He is with the law firm of Stradling. They are the bond counsel on this deal. On his left is Victor Shu. He's the disclosure counsel. He's with Norton Rose Fulbright. And on the far left is Peter Schellenberger, the financial advisor for SANDAG from PFM. Also in the audience today is Chintan. He is with Wells Fargo, who happens to be the senior underwriter on this deal. And then we have the co-senior underwriter is Goldman Sachs, and co-managing this deal is Bank of America, JP Morgan, and Ramirez. So today, the main item that we're going to focus on is item number 4, the bond documents. When I was here 2 weeks ago, we went through items 1, 2, 3, and 5, but I will touch on those items again today just to kind of remind you of what we're doing and why we're here. So this is our current bond portfolio. It's $2.3 billion. It's very conservative. 98% of the bonds currently are fixed. Only 2% of our outstanding debt is commercial paper. So generally, the interest rates that we've seen, the tremendous rise, has not had it has had an immaterial impact on our bond portfolio. That being said, there's an opportunity that the market has given us that we could potentially take out the what we call synthetic fixed rate debt, which is our variable rate debt, which is overlaid with swaps. This is the very first issuance that we did back in 2008 when Transnet 2 was approved. And you can generally see we've been to the bond markets every couple of years. But again, based on the fact that interest rates have gone up as much as they have, our swaps are in a almost positive position. If you look at the PFM memo in the package, at 1.2 years ago, they were in a negative $125 million. Today, it's approximately negative $6 million. We've actually seen them go positive a couple of times. The market has been very volatile. If you've seen recently with the debt limit issues and persistent inflation. So between now and when we go to the market, things will probably be very, volatile, but we basically expect to get the savings that I'll show you. And while we're in the market too, we're looking at taking out part of the 2019 deal. This was a taxable deal. We can change it to a tax exempt, which is more beneficial. So looking at these charts here on the left is the outstanding par breakdown by fixed versus the hedge. So approximately 84% of our portfolio is fixed. The synthetic fixed rate is approximately 16%. And you can see on your right the difference between the taxable and tax exempt. And again, specifically, we're looking to take out the entire synthetic fixed rate and make those all fixed, and then a portion of the taxable as well. So again, why are we issuing these bonds? Generally, the biggest thing is the first one is lower SANDAG's borrowing costs through debt service savings. Currently, we're paying approximately 4% for the synthetic fixed rate portfolio of the variables with the swaps on top of them. By fixing them out, we'll pay approximately 3%. The biggest thing there too is de-risking our portfolio, as well as the swaps have performed over the last 20 odd years. It's opportunity to take them out is probably better than having the swaps there. And then number 2, simplifying SANDAG's portfolio by eliminating the interest rate swaps. Again, the variable rate, every single week they reset. We have to work with the remarketing agent. Every couple of years, we have to work with the banks to get a standby bond purchase agreement. There's a lot of work that staff has to do that we basically eliminate any potential risks that the swaps have. When you do a fixed rate bond, you basically pay interest and principal twice a year and you're done with it. And then lastly, at June 30th of this year, LIBOR, which has been an index that our swaps are tied to, has been around forever, is actually transitioning to what's called a SOFR. Although we don't expect too much of a dislocation initially, maybe long-term there will be. So again, it's like we have the opportunity to get out where we don't have to worry about any future disruptions. So the summary of this transaction is first to take out the entire variable rate bonds, the $383 million, terminate all the associated interest rate swaps, And then depending on market conditions, we'll be able to refund, this $436 million outstanding right now. We may be able to take about 120 to 150, again, depending on market conditions when we go later this month. So the size and structure, 350 million to 820. Right now, we're thinking it'll be about a $500 million deal. And present value savings, 22 to $35 million. Again, this has been fluctuating quite a bit. Our debt portfolio says we have to have at least a 3% savings to go to the market. The other thing it also says, if you can de-risk the portfolio, another reason to go. So we're not as focused on the net present value savings. It's always good, obviously, to have a savings, but the biggest item here is just to have the de-risking of our portfolio. Again, this will be a tax-exempt deal. It'll be sitting on our senior lien. So we met with the credit agencies just last week with S&P and Fitch. We are AAA rated by both those agencies. But every time that you go to the markets, you need to have at least two of the rating agencies affirm your ratings. We're very comfortable that the AAA ratings will be affirmed by both of them. In fact, what we're trying to do is the subordinate lien, that's AA, we're trying to get that upgraded to AA+, which is what we have requested of the rating agencies. And then lastly, the junior subordinate lien, that's where our very favorable lowest yielding instrument, our TIFIA loan, sits at an A+. So the bond documents that are all attached to this report include the PFM memo that was included in your last report. That kind of gives a little bit more detail of what I've spoken to today. Then there's the resolution, the supplemental indenture, the purchase agreement, the bond purchase agreement, the preliminary official statement, the continuing disclosure agreement, the dealer manager agreement, and invitation to tender. So these gentlemen on my left here will be describing these documents in a little bit more detail coming up. So again, I mentioned the financial advisor memo that was in there last week, just goes into a lot more detail about where we are with the markets today. There's the swap termination discussion and the actual refunding structure. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan, and he'll describe starting with attachment to the resolution and follow for the rest of the documents that are in there. Jonathan.
Thank you, Andre. As Andre noted earlier, my name is Jonathan Guz. I'm a shareholder at Stradling, Yoka, Carlson, and Rao, and I'm here today as bond counsel to the Commission in connection with the 2023 bond or the 2023 bonds. I will be discussing the bond documents relating to the issuance of the 23 bonds. So attachment 2 is a draft of the authorizing resolution of the Commission. The resolution authorizes the issuance of one or more series of 2023 bonds in the maximum aggregate principal amount not to exceed $820 million. And that's for the purposes of refunding all of the outstanding 2008 bonds, for paying any termination costs associated with the termination of the interest rate swaps relating to the 2008 bonds, and also refunding a portion of the outstanding 2019 bonds. The resolution also contains certain parameters relating to the bonds, and those parameters include a not to exceed interest rate of 5.5%, not to exceed true interest cost of 4.5%, as well as a maximum maturity date of April 1, 2048. The resolution also approves forms of the documents that are listed on this screen, and we'll discuss those documents in further detail later on in this presentation. And the resolution also authorizes the Commission to take certain other actions that are desirable and necessary for achieving the purposes of the resolution, and that would include entering into an escrow agreement for the 2019 bonds and entering into certain agreements in connection with the termination of the swaps. Attachment 3 is the 13th supplemental indenture to the 13th supplemental to the senior indenture. This document supplements the Commission's master indenture for its senior revenue bonds, and it will provide for the issuance of the 2023 bonds. The 13th supplemental indenture will contain terms relating to the 2023 bonds, such as the redemption provisions. It will also contain certain covenants of the commission, which will include covenants that can, requiring the commission comply with tax and disclosure related requirements. The 13th supplemental indenture is very similar to other supplemental indentures that the commission has entered into with its in connection with its other series of outstanding fixed rate bonds. So they're very familiar terms in this document. And the document will also be updated subsequent to pricing to reflect the results of pricing subject to the parameters that are set forth in the authorizing resolution. So there will be updates such as the actual par amount of the bonds, the maturity dates, the interest rates, things of that nature. Attachment 4 is the bond purchase agreement, and this is an agreement between the commission and Wells Fargo as the senior underwriter and the representative of the underwriters of the 2023 bonds. The document sets forth the terms in which the underwriters will purchase the 2023 bonds from the commission. On the day of pricing, that document will be updated with the results of pricing, so we'll include the par amounts, interest rates, etc., as well as the redemption provisions, and will be, updated to reflect the document or the pricing. In addition, the document contains certain certifications, representations from the commission, as well as the underwriters, and identifies certain certificates, documents, and opinions of the transaction parties that will be delivered on the date of closing. And with that, I will turn it over to Victor to describe the disclosure documents.
Thanks, Jonathan. As Andre mentioned, I'm Victor Hsu, a partner at Norton Rose Fulbright, and we are serving as disclosure counsel to SANDAG on this transaction. Attachment 5 is the preliminary official statement. The preliminary official statement, or POS, contains information, statistics, and summaries regarding the commission, sales tax revenues, and the bonds that prospective purchasers of the bonds are likely to need in order to make an investment decision. The commission has retained us as disclosure counsel to assist the commission in preparing the POS and to complete it once the pricing and sale of the bonds has occurred. The data included in the POS and the final official statement after pricing will be reviewed by commission staff and the financial advisor, and the summaries of the legal documents and the bonds and other content in each document will be reviewed by bond counsel and underwriters counsel. The commission is ultimately responsible to ensure that the POS and final OS are accurate, contain all information material to investors, and do not omit any material information. Backwards, pardon me. Thank you. Attachment 6 is the continuing disclosure agreement. For the underwriters to comply with applicable securities laws and sell the bonds, the commission must agree in a written undertaking to provide 1, annual reports to the municipal marketplace of certain information, including sales tax revenues and audited financial statements. And 2, notices of certain enumerated events, including payment delinquencies, defeasances, and rating changes within 10 business days of their occurrence. The commission has retained Digital Assurance Certification LLC, or DAC, to assist the commission in posting information for investors on the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board's Electronic Municipal Market Access, or EMA system, as required under the Continuing Disclosure Agreement. DAC has assisted the commission in prior bond issues. And I will now turn it back to Jonathan.
Thank you, Victor. Attachment 7 is the form of the dealer manager agreement. This is an agreement between the commission and the co-dealer managers, Wells Fargo and Goldman Sachs, and it's relating to the tender of certain of the 2019 bonds. The agreement sets forth the terms on which the dealer managers will assist the commission with the tender process. The document also includes certain representations that are made by the commission and the co-dealer managers, and also identifies certain certifications as well as certain opinions that will be delivered at the launch of the tender. Attachment 8 is the invitation to tender bonds. The invitation to tender bonds is a marketing document that will be used in conjunction with the preliminary official statement in connection with the tender transaction, which will involve the purchasing of bonds to be refunded directly from current holders of those bonds. The dealer managers will use the invitation to approach current bondholders to determine the tender price. And with that, I will turn it back over to Andre.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you, Jonathan. So in front of you is the cost of issuance of this deal. Potentially right now we're showing it at $1.9 million. I think the biggest numbers you see there is the underwriting syndicate and the dealer manager fee. This is based approximately on $580 million of bonds being issued, but certainly can go down or up depending on what is actually sold based on market conditions. So our next steps, pending approval by the Transportation Committee today, we will take these documents for board approval next week. The following week, we will post the preliminary official statement and the invitation to tender to investors. The week of June 26, a group of SANDAG team will be flying to New York to meet with investors. And then that same week, we will actually price the bonds, sell the bonds, and we intend to close the week of July 10th. So with that, Chair, concludes our presentation. I'll be glad to take any comments or questions from the committee. Thank you.
Thanks, all of you. Do we have any public comments first, and then we'll go to member comments and questions?
Thank you, Chair. We have 2 public comments. We'll start with Blair Beekman and then go to the original draw.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. Sorry, on the previous item, I thought my time was over and I thought my mic was muted, and I let out an exclamation that I was just really happy that I completed my sentences. I think I said a really important good thing, that it's nice when you do that, and I let out an exclamation of happiness, and I'm sorry that was recorded. For this item, I just wanted to comment, you know, good luck in working on these bond issues. We're trying to find ways to work with money issues for SANDAG, and this sounds like you have a good program how to do that. So thank you for that. It's my real sincere hope with the current bus strike going on that you can really find ways to fund bus drivers, that bus drivers can be supported. We really need the services in San Diego, and they're really lacking. And I think there's a way to make it I hate to use the word win-win, but to really kind of, we can double and add to good practices for bus drivers to get their needs met. And then on top of that, work towards a really a faster service model for the future of SDMTS. And when we do that, that really completes tasks of making a better service system overall. To make more buses available more often on routes, I think is a great concept that I hope you want to work towards, and this bond money can really help in that process. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be the original draw. You can go ahead.
So, you know, as we talk about bonds and all of this stuff, I mean, just like with the federal government, the idea is nice, but when we exchange paper for paper and it's all fiat currency, you know, the Federal Reserve sits and prints money, which keeps us in a perpetual state of debt. And it's over nothing. It's not backed by anything. And so listening to you guys talk about this, I'm like, feel like I'm listening to the federal government talk about, you know, trying to keep us out of debt by, you know, issuing bonds and printing money. And it's like, I mean, we used to have gold-backed money, which then would make sense because then you actually have something behind it. But it's just a bunch of fictitious things that we toss around and act like, here, we're going to get money for this, but that's why we're in a state of debt. And you're acting like this will keep us out of that. But I just don't see that. That's why I feel like we have to get out of these types of things. And if you need to implement things and you can't do it with the money that you already have, then maybe you need to think about downsizing all of your plans, because all these things just literally keep us in a state of debt and we can never get out of it. Ever. Like, it's just never going to happen. And if this happened with people, like everyday people, and not these huge entities that are tied to the government, like, people lose their homes, they lose everything. They don't just get to go and print money and act like, it's just going to come out of thin air. But that's what the government does. It comes out of thin air, all while it's like, if it does, and you could just print, why don't you just print a bunch for the people? I mean, what difference does it make if we're already in debt? But it's like, you can only find money for what you want, to push. But it's like, when it's really things that are necessary to like preserve people's lives or like help them out, there's no money for that. And which doesn't make any sense. How it can be that you have it for some stuff and not for all the things that really matter. I mean, like I said before, even just giving people bathrooms. I mean, the basic necessities of life. I mean, you guys can get up and go to the bathroom at any point you want during that meeting. And we have people who are trying to do the right thing and have a job, and they can't even, provide that because there's no money for it. But then we sit here and talk about billions of dollars. So it's like, you're able to find it and it because it comes out of thin air anyway. But you're choosing what you spend it on. And that's very negligent, because you sit here and talk about, wanting to better things and like help people. Then if you did, you would find that money and make sure that there's bathrooms and the basic necessities for people, and not just say, oh, we don't know where it's at. Oh.
That concludes the public comments on this item.
Thank you, Francesca. Do we have any member comments or questions? Let's go with Sandy first, and then Amir Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, staff, for the report. I just have two clarifying questions. The first question on the 1.9 million cost of issuance, it's based on $580 million of bonds. I'm not sure if I heard correctly when you said it could go up on market conditions. Is that the 1.9 million, or what can increase?
Yes, so basically we're paying $1.50 a bond. So right now we intend to issue approximately 580 million. I think that was when we ran those reports, that was what we expected. But if we end up issuing the full 800 million, which is if the market conditions are good for us to do that at the point, then that number will go up. So it's basically $1.50 per bond. So if it's 800 million, certainly that figure will go up.
Got it. And the second question is on timeline. So the July 10th date is the anticipated closing date, but how certain are you on that date? And if not, how much further will you give on closing?
Yeah, generally from the time that we price the bonds, we sell the bonds, and date is about 2 weeks that we close. Certainly it varies by a couple of days, but we're fairly confident that once we sell the bonds, that the closing date is within a 2-week period.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Sanchez.
Thank you. I believe Deputy Mayor David Zito was next.
I'm happy to go to Zito.
Saw his
first.
hand go up before mine.
I just went from one side to the other, but
Okay, thanks. No worries. I don't think it was a raise, but appreciate the consideration. And yeah, Paul, thanks to staff for bringing this forward. I think you guys, I truly appreciate the overview and oversight that you have with respect to trying to make sure you're trying to help us reduce risk and potentially save money too. That's really worthwhile. I'll apologize in advance. I was traveling the vast majority of the month of May, so I wasn't here at the last meeting. Haven't had a time to got back last night, so I haven't had time to ask many questions, but a couple things. One of which, I noticed that the final maturity of the swaps is 2038 and the final maturity of the other bonds are 2048. So these would mature when?
So great question. The variable rate bonds, as you said, do mature 2038, which is 10 years prior to the end of Transnet. But the new bonds that we issue that will supplant the 2008s will go to 2038. However, the 2019s that are maturing in 2048 will go out to 2048 as well. So in essence, we are not extending the duration of these bonds. They will be sitting on kind of basically replacing the bonds at where they currently
So
terminate now.
there will be two maturity dates then is what you're saying, that we would supplant and keep the maturity dates with whatever we're replacing.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks. Then the next question again, and you may not have the answer to this on hand, but the the staff report talks about the swaps have performed well. And I'm curious, and if you can get back to me if we don't have it now, I'm curious how we can measure that. So specifically, when the original measures for both of these issuances were presented to the board, I am curious, one, what the performance has been of these bonds and loans with respect to what was presented to the board at that time, and including now that we're refinancing, absorbing all of the refinancing cost, proposed cost, as well as the new interest rates that we're going to get, and say, okay, when we took out this original loan, we were given an estimate of how much money that financing cost that would be. What does that look like now compared to what was presented back then? Did you understand that?
I did.
Okay.
And I appreciate the question, and I appreciate that you don't want the answer today because it will take a little bit of work, but on an annual basis, on our financial statements, on our footnotes, we disclose exactly what that delta was between what we thought was going to happen versus what actually happened. So it's just a matter of going through every single year and seeing what that number is. But in general, I could tell you that we're very close to zero. In other words, they did what they said they were going to do.
Okay.
Was it going to be more of a cost or less of a cost? But that's a great question. And for
Yeah, I'd
curiosity,
be interested just again, and I suspect it's not just me, but swaps are an insanely complicated structure that I'm still not sure I thoroughly understand, and just understanding how they performed would certainly be helpful. As long as it's not an overly unburdened or overburdened with respect to staff time to figure that out. And then last, you're talking about market uncertainties. We all, I think, understand that at least as of recently, presumably the feds won't default on their debt, which is, I think, a positive thing, which will hopefully help us. But then on the other side, I assume that means they will also be probably flooding the market with T-bills shortly. And so do we expect the fact that the debt crisis is no longer there to cause things to stabilize? And given those two considerations, what the likely outcome is for us with respect to this issuance? Can it be helpful or harmful?
That's a great question. And I'm going to look to PFM or Wells Fargo to answer that, considering that what you've asked is more about the markets.
Right.
And it's a good question. Good morning, I'm Peter Schellenberger. So throughout the last year and a half, it's been the market's been defined through volatility. So interest rates have been up and down and up and down. Since the middle of May, as we've been looking at the risk of the debt ceiling not being extended, we saw interest rates increase about 30 basis points. But just in this last week, we've seen it come down about 10. So the market's reacting favorably to the fact that progress was being made. And as of last night, the Senate passed the bill to approve the increase in the debt limit. So a lot of volatility, and we've been monitoring that. The transaction still generates significant savings. So that's the good news. Following the sort of news of the debt limit increase, we expect things to calm down a little bit. So we're really looking for some calm markets for the next 4 weeks, because we've got another 4 weeks before we enter and price. So we expect that to be the case. We don't expect a whole lot of supply either in tax exempt bonds from issuers like yourself or from the U.S. Treasury to flood the markets. We're not concerned about supply that's sort of dislocating the market. So yeah.
Okay, thanks. So then just clarifying that you don't expect that the U.S. Treasury is going to be flooding with T-bills to try to pay their bills right now. And that's not going to be an issue for us, you think?
There may be an uptick in the issuance of U.S. Treasuries, but it won't impact our market in this sort of tax exempt space greatly.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I can't say that my questions are going to be better. In fact, I think Deputy Mayor Zito's questions are much better than mine. But yeah, I do appreciate his question about how did they perform, at the time that the original agreements were entered into, and now basically indicating that this is like a really optimum time to be doing this. First time in 10 years. That it is something that can you can go forward on, and concerns regarding eliminating the interest rate swaps and going to tax exempt and making them more, less risky. So I get that. There was a reference to something like $25 to $35 million. Is that the savings you think you're going to get out of this transaction, with the cost being close to $2 million? Is that what we're talking about? And moving forward, do you have estimates on how much you think that this is going to save?
So that's
Santiago?
correct. So the issuance cost was approximately 1.9 million. Right now, as of the board report, we had said there's a potential cost of 7 million to terminate the swaps. But then the debt service savings that we get between now and 2048, that number is net 22 to 35 million of savings.
Okay, for the entire period.
For the entire period, correct. Yes.
So initially, are we going to be seeing what is it? What is the net?
So on an annual basis right now, if it was, I'm going to take the midpoint of 30 million, would be approximately $1.7 million in savings each year through 2048.
Okay, I see. So the first year, we're going to see a little bit of a net loss because of the cost of doing this, but after that, it's going to...
We're not going to see a net loss at all because we sell these bonds at a premium. And so when we sell those bonds at a premium, there's enough premium to pay off the negative portion of the swaps. And so there's no loss in this transaction. It's just a gain going forward. So we don't see the entire 30 million coming into our coffers, but we see that gradually through 2048 at $1.7 million per year.
Thank you. But the cost of almost 2 million is...
Again, that's absorbed in the premium that we sell the bonds at.
Great. Right. Thank you very much.
I'll add, can I add to that, Andre?
Please.
Yeah. Just to reiterate, so we're absolutely clear, any costs associated with the transaction, whether it's cost of issuance, the 1.9 million, or the cost to terminate the swaps, currently, as Andre said, about 7 million, is fully baked in any savings numbers that we share with you. So when we say there's $20 million savings, that's a net of all those costs.
And is that over time?
And it is smoothed in, just sort of similar to your home mortgage. You'll have costs that you need to pay upon closing your mortgage, but you will repay those in the form of the debt repayment over the life of your mortgage. And similar with these bonds, we're going to repay that. And so, all the costs are accounted for. Any savings numbers we give you is net of those costs. And the savings is in that approximate 20 million range right about now.
Great. Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? If not, I think we're ready to move on this to recommend staff recommendation to move this forward to the.
I was just going to say I'd recommend, I'd move approval of recommending this to the board.
We have motion by Zito. Do I have a second by Sanchez? So moved by Zito. If no other comments, we can go ahead and vote on moving this forward.
And that motion passes with 5 yeses and 1 abstention.
Great. I think we can move on to item number 5, which is annual TDA Productivity Improvement Program results. And we have Ashley Wiley here to make a presentation on that.
Hello, and thank you, Chair Shu. Good morning, Transportation Committee. My name is Ashley Wiley, and I'm a regional planner here at SANDAG. I will be presenting on the Transportation Development Act, abbreviated as TDA, fiscal year 2023 Productivity Improvement Program, and fiscal year 2024 allocations. For your consideration today is the approval of each operator's eligibility to receive their TDA funding for fiscal year 2024. Since SANDAG is the designated regional transportation planning agency known as the RTPA, we are responsible for distributing state funding to eligible providers, which for us are MTS, NCTD, and FACT. The TDA, which gives money for transit operations, has some requirements on how we give out these funds. State law states that we are able to give out to the transit operators more funding in a fiscal year than the last, as long as we have proof that they are making improvements to become more productive and using the strategies that are recommended in their previous audit. FACT is not eligible for an increase since their performance cannot be monitored the same as the transit agencies, at least for this program requirements. For here, this is our timeline. In February, this committee and the board voted in favor of the funding increases, as long as MTS and NCTD came back to show that they were making improvements, which are detailed in the attachments to this item. Right now, we are evaluating their efficiency at making the suggested improvements. And then later this month in June, you and the board will be asked to approve their claims for the new year. SANDAG has a transit monitoring program that is inclusive of staff of data analysts, planners, and both transit agencies, as well as FACT, who evaluate MTS and NCTD on a quarterly basis on 6 performance measures. For example, how much revenue generates versus operating costs. These are all detailed also in the staff report. During COVID, ridership was down, but as we noticed over the last year, both agencies are starting to recover to their pre-COVID levels of ridership and service. In response to the pandemic, Assembly Bill 90 and Assembly Bill 149 have temporarily suspended the requirements that transit agencies recover a certain % of their operating cost via their passenger revenues or fares. Despite this, we still evaluate their overall performance. As I mentioned before, the other items we are looking at is whether they're responding to their triennial performance audit. The last audit took place in 2022, and each agency had one minor recommendation, but both agencies were meeting their requirements to continue receiving their TDA requirements in their funding. So again, here are the revised fiscal year 2023 and fiscal year portions of the TDA funding that each agency was approved to get earlier this year. Both NCTD and MTS are expected to receive a roughly 3% increase. Based on your recommendation to the board of directors, you will be able to approve each agency's eligibility to receive their funding increases. With the operator's actions to implement, With the operator's actions to implement the audit recommendations to increase and improve productivity, it is SANDAG staff opinion that both MTS and NCTD have met and made reasonable efforts towards achieving their fiscal year 2023 productivity goals. So therefore, the Transportation Committee is asked to recommend to the Board of Directors to approve the eligibility of Metropolitan Transit System and North County Transit District to receive their fiscal year 2024 allocations, TDA allocation of funds. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. And I'm also joined here with Sharon Cooney from MTS, Chris Orlando and Yoon Park Lynch from NCTD, and Arun Pran of FACT.
Great, thank you. Let's do public comments first. Francesca, do we have any public comments?
Thank you, Chair. We have one public comment, the original draw. You can go ahead when you're ready.
So I guess I haven't necessarily seen what the audit is for 2022, but when we are talking about, show that they're making improvements and whatnot, even if they were making improvements for the things in that audit, they're failing at this moment for 2023. I mean, if MTS is striking and we're still giving them, they can't even keep their workers, and even if they do, they're having medical issues. So I guess I just don't understand. It's like, you should, be determining where that money would go then. If these people can't spend the money wisely and provide things, I mean, we're spending $10,000 on trash cans that are self-compacting in solar. I still don't understand if those are going to work past the time the sun is up, but we're wasting money on things that are not going to, move the needle forward. And you're saying you can find money for trash cans like that. I just don't feel like why would anybody want to work for MTS or any of these transit systems when you're basically saying there is no money to provide you with the necessary things that you need in order to do this job and do it well. I feel like I'm the only one who sees this and that sees that it's just such a, it's sad because, we throw around millions and billions of dollars and, you want people to use this kind of transit and, you want them to improve it. But it's like, if we can't even improve that part, why are we even giving them funding? I mean, MTS spends 210 million or whatever on buses that no one rides. And you have that 200, I mean, how is that keeping those buses going, number one? But number two, why is there no money in there just to provide a bathroom? Like, I just don't understand that. And I think that, as these people who are dictating these things get to go to the bathroom whenever they want, and just throw around money like we don't have enough for that, why would anybody want to work in these entities? You want to incentivize them through other means. But it's like, so if you have money to give them more money to pay them or, different things like that, why the heck aren't there money for bathrooms? I mean, that's something you guys need to think about when we're, giving people money for making improvements that they're not even going to be making. They're not making improvements like that. You're just going to give them this money and it's going to go to some BS, agenda that isn't going to help these people. So, I mean, if we can find millions of dollars and, $10,000 for trash cans, pretty sure you can find it for bathrooms. So if you're going to increase that, you need to make sure this money is being spent where it's actually going to move the needle forward and not push it back. If you guys want this agenda to go forward.
We will have one additional speaker, Blair Beekman. You can go ahead.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. I wanted to quickly comment. Ideas of productivity are kind of it can be related to ideas of morale, how we work together as an agency. And SANDAG's been going through some difficulties. If we're clear and open with each other and open accountable practices, like the work I do with tech issues, that really works towards a morale that can't be beat, second to none, that people just enjoy and feel happy about. And when you do good practices and want to create practices of open democracy, when you work towards those good goals, they just naturally people tend to grow happier. So good luck how to really address those sort of practices. And what the previous speaker said, there's real trade-offs about technology issues like the smart trash cans, the big bellies, and that we have to really have a very good balanced system that if we're going to employ really questionable technology, we have to be really sure and clear that we're also going to have very, open, accountable policies and practices for all this new technology. And we have to want to enjoy that work. It can't be just a drudgery. I think there can be a real way that it can be enjoyable. And it's that enjoyment of just good practices of open democracy, of respecting civil protections before the needs of technology first. That is the way to build a more harmonious, happy, positive future that I think we want to do, that we just don't know how to do better. That we do know how to do better now. We have guidelines and practices towards openness and accountability, things that I hope we want to work on. It can really help. And it's just my whole life right now. And thanks for listening.
That concludes the public commenters.
Thank you. Let's go on to member comments. Mayor Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that we recommend to the Board of Directors approval of the eligibility of MTS and NCTD to receive their fiscal year 2024 Transportation Development Act allocations.
So it's moved by Sanchez.
Second.
By Brett Patel. Any other comments before we go for Zito?
Yeah, I did have one question. I support the motion. I think this is great, but I was kind of curious for my own edification. This may be down in the details a little bit too much, but as I'm looking through this and seeing things with the data with respect to fare box recovery and revenue mile, I'm assuming our free transit for youth program doesn't, since we're paying for it, doesn't get actually treated as fare in the fare box recovery as paying passengers, right? It's actually working against us in that way, so to speak. That makes sense.
I can answer that.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so we put it in as fair revenue at MTS because you pay us.
Oh, so it is treated as fair revenue right now. Okay, so that was my question. Thanks.
This is you for NCTD. For NCTD purposes, the Youth Opportunity Pass started in May of 2022. So the full impact of the revenues from SANDAG will not be reflected until FY23. So FY22 only has 2 months of revenue. But for purpose of NTD reporting, we report it as fares paid by SANDAG. But for the purpose of our annual financial report, we report as local grants. It's not including fares.
Helpful, thanks.
I have just one quick, I'll be remiss if I don't support my MTS board members. So Sharon, do you have a quick answer with regards to the restroom issue that comes up in public comments often? And I know it comes up in your board meetings every now and then. If you could just give us a quick answer on that, that would be great.
Yes, we make sure we have restrooms in the areas around where they're going to end their route so that they can take advantage of that. So there are various locations, but you know, we don't stop our trains, for instance, in the middle of the train route, you know, and things like that. So it's the same treatment for the bus routes as well. But in the event that there is an urgent need, they are able to radio in and mention that as well. But I did want to mention that we do have a number of restrooms out there. Frequently they're porta-johns. You can see them in the downtown area. There's many of them. For other times it's locations where we arrange with the business owner to allow for it as well. So it varies based on the location.
Great. Well, thank you. I know that's a challenge for MTS, but I know you're working on it. So thank you very much. With that, if there's no other comments, we can go ahead and take a vote. It was moved by Sanchez and second by Patel.
That motion passes unanimously with those members present.
Thank you. So we have Alan next. Thank you for coming back, Alan. I know we held you for a long time and then never got to you at the last meeting. So thank you for coming back to give us a report on Caltrans, from Caltrans, an update on North Coast Corridor.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm Alan Costa, Corridor Director for Caltrans. And let's see, wait for a PowerPoint to come up. Oh, my bad. Not my PowerPoint. Perfect. So normally we use these items to focus in on the ongoing construction, the Build NCC project in the corridor. Since we hadn't been here in a while, I figured I'd step back and look at the bigger picture real quick. And just remind folks that the construction that you see out on the interstate is part of a larger vision. And the vision, the North County Corridor vision, less than 10 years ago, Caltrans, SANDAG, and the community and the cities in the corridor got together and developed the $6 billion multimodal integrated plan. And it really is the flagship in San Diego, I think, for multimodal corridor planning, but it also throughout the state, it's one of the first. And in less than 6 years, we've completed about $1.4 billion of improvements as a joint team out there. Added a number of 10.5 miles of managed lanes. We've added significant double track, 7 miles of active transportation, and 400 acres of restored habitat. In addition to the completed items, we've got, I'll just highlight a couple of those projects. In the UCSD area, we have the Genesee improvements, the bike trail that connected the university and the Sorrento Valley Transit Station. We've done a number of double track projects, such as the San Alejo Lagoon double track and the new active transportation. This is the North County Bike Trail. In addition to the completed projects, we have about $1.5 billion worth of projects that we're all working on together in various phases of development. And just like the completed projects, they're in a balanced highway, rail, and active transportation. And some of those projects include kicking off the environmental document for the I-5-78 interchange improvements. As Colleen mentioned early on, we're getting really close to beginning construction on San Dieguito double track improvements. And if you drive out in the corridor, you'll see ongoing construction in the San Dieguito Lagoon as habitat restoration, lagoon restoration goes on there. And one big advantage of this sort of comprehensive planning is you can get in and identify mitigation upfront for the entire 30-year package of improvements. And so mitigation that you see or construction that you see at San Dieguito is part of that long-range comprehensive environmental mitigation. So with that as background, I was going to jump and then focus in on the construction that you see. That we refer to that as Build NCC. And that's an $850 million project, right? It's a subset of that larger corridor. And that's been going on for since 2016. We've done some of the double track work. We've restored San Alejo Lagoon, and we've opened up about 10 miles of managed lanes so far. The contractor out there is a joint venture with Flatiron, Skanska, Stacy Whitbeck, FSSW. And that $850 million project was really 7 individual contracts that we have with them. And as you can see, 4 out of the 7 are complete. And we've got 3 remaining. 2 of the remaining are more than 90% complete. They're substantially complete. We've got 1 project left at the very north end of the corridor, and we'll go into a little bit of detail. That's the project that we've wrapped up design. We're negotiating a price with the contractor, and we should be under construction by late fall. So as we look at the ongoing construction out there, first, the good news, we'll be opening up the remaining managed lanes. These are the managed lanes that go from Palomar Airport Road to 78. The event will be June 13th, and lanes in the southbound direction will open the night of 13th, between 13 and 14. And then 2 weeks later, we'll be opening the northbound lanes. So when we look at the remaining construction and some of the work that'll be starting this fall, it includes work in Agua Hedionda Lagoon, where we're doing, we recently received Ayuda funding. We received an $8 million grant for climate action in order to protect the lagoon and the infrastructure that's in the lagoon. If you look at some of the existing conditions, you see how wave action has eroded the culverts, and we'll be repairing that and protecting the infrastructure for ultimate sea level rise. We'll also be adding aux lanes in Carlsbad between Cannon and Poinsettia, both northbound and southbound. And then we're doing a number of sort of community connectivity projects, essentially bridging I-5 or improving the connection, the east-west connection at Palomar Airport Road. Also at Chestnut in Carlsbad, much like the improvements you've seen at Encinitas, we're pushing back the abutment walls and we're adding new bike facilities and pedestrian facilities. We've got schools on one side. Actually, we've got schools on both sides. And you can see a lot of needs out there today. So that's part of the project coming up. And we're also adding sound walls. And that's in the last project. And then lastly, this project that'll be getting underway this fall will include a number of next OS sort of improvements at the intersections. We've got brand new technology related to V2X, so we'll be building that infrastructure so that now the intersections can speak directly with the cars. And as that becomes more prevalent, they'll be even more successful. So things like queue warning, or that there's, pedestrians in the intersection, so forth. So we're building that infrastructure into the project. And then lastly, ongoing construction in the multi-use facility there at Manchester. And this is, it'll be a combination park and ride, traditional park and ride, but also it provides parking for all of the nature trails and the bike active transportation that we've built in the corridor. We've been running a little late on that, but we will be opening the first phase first week in July. So that sort of highlights the existing construction that we've got out there remaining. I did want to highlight some of the successes in the $850 million project, right? As we wind down in construction, we kind of forget what we've been able to accomplish as a region. This was the active transportation trail at San Alejo when we started in 2016. That's what it looks like now. Same facility. We're seeing a lot of good usage of this is the trail that connects Cardiff and Solana Beach, right? There was really no way to get from those two communities unless you had to go all the way to the beach. And so you're seeing a lot of demand on the new facility. If you haven't been in the lagoon has really come back quickly. You can't even really see, we've been mucking around in it. It surprises me what it looks like right now. And we're seeing, deer return, octopus in the lagoon. So from Nature Collective, who manages the facility, they've been very surprised with how resource has recovered. And then in terms of the connectivity, community connectivity, we've been partnering with Encinitas, and just there at, I think, December, the final art went into the interchange. So I want to finish when we talk about success. Some of the success that we just saw is pretty obvious, right? Visually, you can see it. Talk about managed lanes and carpool lanes. How do you manage success? I mean, you can see it out there. The carpool lanes are running well. But if we dive in a little bit deeper into some of the data, I just kind of wanted to share some of these preliminary findings. So if you look at the graph, what you're looking at is travel time through the corridor. So it's a 10-mile corridor. The orange line sort of represents the average travel time throughout the day. So if you're headed in the northbound direction, you were used to in 2016, 2017, probably take you an extra 10 minutes to get through that 10-mile corridor during the peak period. If you went into the COVID years, things got better. Not for a good reason, but they were better, but there was still some congestion out there. These are on the main lanes. But by the time we opened the carpool lane last year, you saw pretty much traffic returning to where it was. So the red line, or the orange line, I'm sorry, is what it looked like in 2022 before we opened the facility. And this is what it looks like today. So the blue line at the bottom is the carpool lane. So that's the travel time in the carpool lane. And then the dark blue line is the new travel time in the GPs. And this is actual data coming right off the freeway. So the important thing to focus on is the time difference between the carpool lane and the general purpose lane, right? That's the incentive that's attracting people into the facility. So I think when and makes it more reliable for BRTs and so forth. And so that's really the win we're having there. And the key will be maintaining that delta as we move forward, right? And to keep monitoring that. So that's my summary today. The project is moving along well. It's in budget. We don't have any construction claims. And we've got two major milestones coming up in the next 4 to 6 weeks. So appreciate your patience out there. Questions?
We'll go to public comments first, Alan, then we'll come to board member comments and questions. So Francesca, do we have any public comments on this item?
Thank you, Chair. We do have a few public comments on this item. We'll start with Timothy Bilaashka and then go to Blair Beekman on Zoom. Oh, Tim, I don't think your mic is on. If you could hit the button. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, committee again. Timothy Bilaashka, Delmar area. I want to congratulate Caltrans and the SANDAG efforts on the San Elijo Lagoon first. It really is quite an amazing project. Like many of the projects, we talk about it, we don't realize what went in there and the difficulties, particularly in terms of, I'm aware of the environmental restrictions on doing that. So I thank them. Just to mention, there was supposed to be a DAR there, DAR, and that's come up at some of the other meetings as part of the transportation plans, but they're a little expensive. And again, we have funding needs. I just wanted to mention something about the San Dieguito Lagoon. I've talked before about the erosion in the soil on the south side of the lagoon. Parts of the banks just lost 3 to 10 feet in February storms in 1 week. The seawalls are breaking down. There's a huge amount of water. And this morning I mentioned water vapor as a problem. We are not studying that. Water is very heavy. And I'm aware of the difference potentially between the San Dieguito Lagoon restorations and the San Elijo Lagoon. My understanding is they opened up the channel a little bit so that water flows easier. The east side of the I-5 on the San Dieguito Lagoon, we're slowing the water down to try to get it to percolate in there. There was a mention of the need to replace the railroad bridge across that. And before that was a stable bridge. I believe it's now unstable and an urgent project. So funding for that's important. But to my science eye, we are sequestering water up in the hills around Delmar. And instead of it going out to sea quickly, it needs to percolate in water that's only surface sand. And so the geotechnical aspects of that are important. The modeling we have is probably inadequate. And so I think probably we need to spend more attention on that. I might suggest a soil conservation summit as a second issue. I'm becoming aware that agricultural practices and building are destroying the microstructures of some of the fungi in the soil. These nourish plants, and particularly in desert areas. There is a Mojave Desert project where they have solar types of large acreage. And these are areas of sequestration of water. And we're losing those because we're not measuring it. The building does that. When we till soil, it does that. So soil regeneration may become a more important issue and needs to be looked at in terms of the water vapor we're returning to the atmosphere that comes down all at once. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our final speaker will be the original draw. You can go ahead.
I did want to mention when we were talking about the bathrooms just a second ago, I'm talking about when people are not just at the end of the route, some of them were eating and couldn't even get it, but it's also for the people riding the transit. So you may be providing them at the end of a route for somebody, but anybody riding this type of transportation has no means to access that. And that needs to change when you guys spend so much money on this crap. Now this is like a 30-year plan and you want to improve, the roads and different things like that. But when you guys also have a plan to get people to de-incentivize them to drive, you talk about taking out lanes and, doing things like that. So a lot of your plans I find are contradictory to each other because on one hand, you want to improve the roads and make them bigger. And then on the other, you want to make sure that nobody drives. So it's a little bit confusing, but the whole smart vehicle to infrastructure communications, I'm wondering, are those going to be a certain type of smart vehicle that is all of a sudden going to be able to communicate with this kind of infrastructure? Do you already have vehicles that can do that? And regardless, I just feel like that is a waste of money, but it is more of a, we're not taking care of the people. We want to bring in, like Blair was saying, something about technology, and it's like at the cost of bringing in technology, the people suffer. So it's like, we want to bring in all of these neat things like, oh, this is, AI and this does that and it can, improve your life. Well, but all at the same time, well, I bet you there's some people that are homeless down in the corridor somewhere. Did you just move them somewhere else? Are you providing homes for them? I feel like in our pursuit to, progress the way that the world wants us to with this whole climate action plan, that we leave the people behind and we're more concerned about preserving the land and, the living creatures within that. Well, we are part of those living creatures on that land. And I feel like, we're more willing to preserve a butterfly than help somebody that's on the streets because we tell them there's no homes or, hey, we'll just give you a vaccination. It's like we say that there isn't enough money, and it's like that whole restroom thing. The claim was there's not enough money to put restrooms out, but you have $10,000 to spend on one trash can. I mean, think about that. It's like we're sacrificing human life to preserve something that, what's the point of having this land if there's no people to enjoy it? Like you just want the butterflies and the octopus to enjoy it. We are greater than them, so we should be concerned about ourselves, not just these species that we're killing anyway. I just feel like you guys need to look deep in your heart and think, are we actually helping people, or are we just bettering some kind of agenda that doesn't really do anything for the people?
Chair, would it be okay to take one more? Blair's hand went up again. I think he might have been having technical issues.
If we could just ask Blair to we do want to finish on time today. So Blair, if you can keep it short, I would appreciate it.
Hi, Blair Beekman. Thank you for being able to call on me. And I was about to thank yourselves that you've allowed 3 minutes public comment today. It's allowed me a bit more space and breathing room to speak. And interestingly, I haven't used a lot of my 3 minutes. So thank you. For this item, yeah, this is a great item. I like the way it was talked about. It offered a lot of programs, and it offered a versatility in how to talk about different issues of the North Corridor areas. And I have real concerns about the future of the rail line that we all know and love that can go from San Diego into LA. I guess that's an Amtrak line. It's really, it's an important, just really nice line that I know you guys are working hard to keep it going, but I think we can hopefully, possibly, maybe want to pull back from it if needed. And there's other rail lines that can get from San Diego to LA that maybe we can concentrate on more in the future and just respect the environment and the ocean side, area as it is. And I just feel if we start building so close to the ocean again, it's gonna screw with the ecosystem. That's really vital in that area, and that's really fragile. And I just, good luck how to do it. I'm just very cautious in having to move forward in continuing what was once a very beautiful rail line. Good luck in how to work on it and in the coming months. And what I thought was so interesting about today's item is that it seemed to offer a lot of interesting other choices, how to work towards projects and how to consider things. Good luck in those efforts. The ecosystem around, the Del Mar, Carlsbad area is just so vital. And yeah, boy, good luck how we talk about its issues. And to quickly conclude, a person earlier talked about the importance of different modes of transportation between Oceanside and into Orange County. There's that stretch that is just all highway at this point that, yeah, real good luck how to create different forms of transportation through there. Bicycling, walking, paths, trails. It's really necessary. There's a real superstitious, weird things that go on along that highway that I think creating different modes of transportation through there can really help a lot with. And thanks overall for this item, and thanks a lot for your patience in listening to my public comments all the time. Thank you.
That concludes the public commenters.
Do you have any member comments, Mayor Sanchez?
Thank you. And I appreciate very much the update on the North Coast Corridor Program. Wonderful, wonderful report. I will say, however, that residents and leadership in Oceanside are very disappointed that it hasn't, that the whole plan did not go through Oceanside, at least in terms of a timeline, a closer timeline. Would love to have some really nice projects within Oceanside in terms of widening and other projects, especially. We do have Buena Lagoon, which is on a separate tract. Yes, we do have, and SANDAG did help out with the environmental studies, and that's finally we are working together. The landowners at the mouth of the Buena Lagoon are working with us now in terms of the restoration. Major thing that would really benefit the region in many ways. We do still have the Coastal Rail Trail that is incomplete going through Oceanside. City recently we just approved some additional funds to make it more shovel ready. So we're hoping that we will reapply to get funding for that to be completed. It's something that has been in the works for over 20 years, as I recall, to get that completed. Appreciate that we're going to restart conversations regarding the I-578. It is a highly controversial kind of subject matter because the residents in South O especially do not want to see a flyover, which is something that was the major kind of alternative that Caltrans was looking at doing. So some perhaps other alternatives to that. But yes, I understand that is one of the only places where you have a major freeway, highway 78 terminating into a residential neighborhood. And so you've got that, and then also the option of getting onto the I-5. But that is, again, something that is very near and dear to the heart of Oceanside residents that will definitely be wanting to be included in any discussions, including the environmental portion of this, and looking forward to how we can include Oceanside within that broader kind of, discussion on what has happened in the other parts of the county. Hopefully will happen here too. Thank you.
Any other member comments or questions? Mr. Zito.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for the update, Alan. I do think it's would like to add, as someone who goes around in this infrastructure that you've built on a regular basis, just comments and verification of how well it's being used. All of the bike trails and ped trails that have been put in are incredibly well used and performing a lot of benefit for the people that live in those areas, and that's greatly appreciated. As someone who bikes all over North County and San Diego County, I think it's worth emphasizing, though, as you continue to work on other areas that the two times that I feel that most risk for my personal safety are, one, being in a shopping mall and parking lot, and that I just choose to ignore at this point. I just don't have to go to shopping malls. But then the second one are dealing with freeway interchanges. And the treatments that you've been able to do recently on some of the freeway interchanges make all the difference in the world. I mean, I can go through the Genesee I-5 freeway interchange and feel comfortable biking through that. If I do the same thing with La Jolla Village Drive, I feel like I'm probably better off in Iraq or Iran or someplace like that, just because it seems so generous. So as you continue to develop through the county, I would just encourage us to make sure that we really keep a focus on that. And I see that you were showing some of the improvements that were being done in Encinitas, but let's make sure anytime we have to touch a freeway interchange that we do focus on that and keep those improvements going, because it really does make a huge difference. And the other one is, I've been thoroughly enjoying the trails that we build along the freeways as well. The one between, Sereno Valley and Genesee next to I-5, the ones that are in Solana Beach and Encinitas, they're very well used. They're very useful. And any place that we can do that, let's make sure we continue to do that and have the multi-use trails paralleling the freeway. Clearly the one on 56 is very well used as well. So keep up the good work, and let's continue to look for opportunities to make this a safe environment. Thanks.
Any other? Caltrans, yes.
Thank you, Chair Shu. I just wanted to add a couple of things. One is first actually to congratulate Alan and the team for doing such a great job leading this project. This project, he makes it sound easy, but it's not easy to basically rebuild this entire transportation corridor while you have vehicles and trains still going through it. And it's been a major feat that could only be done under his leadership and a great team that is Caltrans people, SANDAG, staff, consultants, and contractors. A couple of things that I wanted to mention about the project itself. One is it's a CMGC project, so it's not your typical design, bid, build project. So for these type of complex projects, it's a better option because it reduces the risks for the agency when you bring the contractors early on and they provide input into the design of the project. And together you can collaborate on better ways of designing the project for the workers, for the public in general. The second one, in one of the slides, you may have seen some orange striping. This is a pilot that we're doing here in San Diego for the state of California. That's to highlight construction areas for the traffic to protect our workers. So that's one example how we can get to Vision Zero by highlighting construction areas, getting people to slow down and make the construction areas more noticeable and make all construction workers safer when they're trying to rebuild our infrastructure. Thank you.
Any other member comments or questions? Well, I have to give some full disclosure here. So Alan, this 11-mile stretch that you're giving a report on is part of the 27-mile North Coast Corridor improvements that started over 10 years ago.
Yes.
Yeah. So the full disclosure part is I was in the litigation against SANDAG against the whole project. So Alan will probably remember me from there. So with that, I have a few questions. First of all, that trail that you showed in San Lagoon is one that I'm familiar with. Some may question whether there's improvement or not. I kind of like the adventure of going over those wooden bridges. In any case, I'm glad that you are looking at the time traveled through the area, especially comparing normal lanes with HOV lanes. I think that's a very good information to have. But the question I have is, will we be monitoring overall VMT now and how it continues in the next few years, particularly with the phenomena of, I should say phenomena, but the proven theory of induced demand. So since we're trying to reduce VMT, I think the current goal is 3% per year starting this year. How are we going to deal with that issue as we make these improvements?
So a lot to unpack there, right? In terms of monitoring it, yeah, and that's definitely an emerging science, right? Traditionally, the way we've looked at VMT is modeled information. Then the good news is a lot of new technology is coming on and vendors who can look at VMT not only from the facility standpoint, but from a whole subregion. So, sometimes what you may see is people moving from an arterial back onto the freeway or vice versa, right? So it's important that when we look at measuring VMT, that we get a snapshot of the entire, so at least the entire subregion. And until recently, we haven't been able to do that. But yes, VMT is an important performance measure looking forward. And the real power of the managed lanes is to get more throughput in essentially the same number of vehicles, right? And so over time, you're going to be raising the occupancy, you're going to be bringing in BRT, and through that, and using that incentive to bring them over into that lane, you're going to be accommodating the population growth in the region, jobs growth in the region. And so it's definitely a balance, right? And that's why I think it's important to plan these corridors together so that you've got the rail and you've got other choices in the corridor, and so that we can address the growth that's happening in a region. So it is very important to us, the VMT. But we do believe that managed lanes are an important part of the ultimate solution.
Sure, but it is an additional lane we added that VMT that did. So I mean, what we did was so that was the issue at the time: is are we increasing VMT or decreasing VMT if we add another HOV lane? But I hope we do monitor overall amount of vehicles going up and down. but also in terms of congestion, how that plays out if induced demand does come into play in the next 2 to 4 years, and whether or not we end up with the same amount of congestion as we do now. So that's great. I really want for us to monitor this more. I think we have a lot to learn from that. And I hope that sometime the settlement agreement and the resulting study that came from that legal action against Caltrans comes before SANDAG, so we know what the alternatives would have been and the advantages that the alternatives may have created for us in our region. But thank you, Alan, because we finally got you in and we have one more item to get through. But thank you very much for coming in with those wonderful presentation and information about this 12-mile stretch that we're improving. I use it often, so I'm actually watching those improvements go in. But Gustavo, those orange lines, I think you need speed bumps because they're not slowing us down very much. Thank you very much. So next, we'll go to Jeff, who's going to provide us with an update on the regional medium and heavy duty zero emission vehicles in blueprint.
Good morning, folks. Thank you all for bearing with us. And I know I'm the last item here, so hopefully it's entertaining and at least interesting, if not entertaining. My name is Jeff Hoyos. I'm a senior regional planner here at SANDAG. I work on the climate team within the planning department. And today I'm here to provide an update on the regional medium duty, heavy duty zero emission vehicle blueprint. If you recall, I was at TC in late April with the citing criteria that we talked about. So today we're talking about strategies. Little agenda for today. We're going to talk about the project background and overview as a refresher for folks. And then we'll talk about near and long-term implementation strategies we're looking at within this blueprint. And then I'll kind of just wrap us up with the overall steps of this blueprint effort. And then I really want to open it up for discussion and talk about some of these strategies, get your input so you can help inform our strategy development, which will all be rolled into the overall blueprint. This slide will look familiar for those of you who were at the April meeting. And as you all know, California has some pretty ambitious state goals for zero emission technology and adoption. And that's to help mitigate greenhouse gas emissions, reduce climate impacts. And within these goals, there are regulations set for trucks and buses. There are complementary regulations and rules set by CARB, including the Innovative Clean Transit Rule, the Advanced Clean Fleet Regulation, and the Advanced Clean Truck Regulation. These are all helping us reach our targets for zero emission trucks and buses here on California roads. And here in San Diego, we're looking at this blueprint to help us accelerate that transition so we can meet our fair share of trucks and bus zero emission vehicles. So I won't spend too much time on this slide. This is also a refresher, but really this blueprint's meant to help accelerate the transition to zero emission vehicles. SANDAG alone can't do a transition region-wide or statewide. We're really looking to help meet our fair share of state goals, make sure that the economy is able to address and be ready for these changes. And so we've developed a needs assessment this past winter and the citing criteria this spring. I brought both of those to the April meeting. We talked about that. Thank you for your input. Today we're talking about the near and long-term implementation strategies. And then that, like I said, this will all be wrapped into our original blueprint, which we'll be bringing back this fall. So for a refresher, this comes from our needs assessment. We're looking at 70,000 vehicles that are trucks and buses that are zero emission by 2040. The majority of those we're expecting to be battery electric, with a smaller fraction of that being fuel cell electric. There will continue to be diesel and gasoline, natural gas vehicles on the roads out beyond 2040, but this is our fair share of state targets out to 2040. And to meet those demands or those needs, there's going to be infrastructure that is needed. And so we're expecting the majority of charging to be private at depots or at warehouses, behind fences, privately owned and operated. But we do know that there will need to be a fraction of that being public chargers for folks who don't have access to charging at home, for the operators that don't have access to charging at their warehouses, or for operators that need to extend their range beyond what they can meet with their current battery ranges. We're also going to need hydrogen fueling stations to accompany that for the fuel cell electric vehicles. We currently have 2 light duty stations in San Diego that are hydrogen. And so we're looking at 83 hydrogen fueling stations needed by 2040. And that will be a combination of private and public hydrogen fueling stations. So it's some pretty ambitious targets. And there are definitely some barriers to adoption. It's not an easy target. And so through our outreach and through our engagement, coming to the TC, we've identified a number of barriers, including cost. The vehicles and the infrastructure are costly up front. The infrastructure and access to that infrastructure within the portside communities, the communities that are most affected by these trucks and buses, it can be challenging. Energy demand is definitely a challenge. The grid is in need of additional upgrades in order to be able to support the future of these electric vehicles. There are regulations that we can be looking at to support the transition rather than to slow down that transition. There are vehicles that are available today, but not all the vehicles that are available can meet every single demand and need of the operators that are currently operating in California. There are trucks and buses that have special needs that currently don't exist in the electric vehicle space right now. And so that needs to, as technology improves, we'll need to be looking at that. And then awareness and education and understanding of the technologies, both by the communities, so understanding the pros and cons of the technologies so they can advocate or at least be aware of the risks of these technologies, as well as the drivers and owners and operators, understanding what is available today and into the future. So those are the barriers. And so we're looking at identifying some strategies that will help address those barriers. We've broken them into 3 buckets. We have regulatory funding and support. We have energy demand and infrastructure, as well as education, outreach, and engagement. And then with each one of those buckets, we have a number of strategies that are listed within our strategy report, which is available via the link in your staff report. So I'm not going to go into every single strategy today, but I want to highlight a few of those. I mentioned cost being a major barrier to adoption. The high upfront cost of electric vehicles or fuel cell vehicles is definitely an issue for folks that may not otherwise be able to afford them. So we're looking at incentives for the vehicles and the infrastructure and targeting those incentives at the folks that are most affected by the technologies or by the diesel trucks that are operating in communities. Also, access to clean and safe hydrogen production. Being able to produce that hydrogen in a renewable and sustainable manner is important if we're looking to meet our greenhouse gas emission goals, and making sure that that production is safe and does not disproportionately affect the communities. There are a number of, with this advanced clean fleet regulation, there's a conversation happening about coordination across international borders. We have our neighbors, Mexico to the south. We have state borders that we have neighbors with that don't have the same regulations and policies that California does. And so we're looking at ways we can complement our policies to make sure that we can continue to bring economic value to the region and to the state without driving goods movement out of California, and figuring out ways we can not dictate the policies across borders and across state lines, but more so share best practices, share our learnings, and understand ways we can work together to continue to promote trade and transit. Lastly, what I'll mention here is weight exemptions. Batteries are inherently heavy currently. And so we're looking at some near and long-term strategies to help with the weight issues. Near term, we're thinking about things like weight exemptions. Currently there's a weight exemption for clean trucks or buses that, you get you an extra 2,000 pounds of weight on the road. But most battery packs are about 10,000 pounds. So you still have an 8,000 pound difference that is an issue. So long-term, an exemption may not work because we know that degradation on the roads is associated with the heavier weight of the vehicles. So we may see a near-term weight exemption, but longer-term looking at innovative technologies that can help reduce the weight of the technology, or excuse me, the batteries, whether that's things like wireless charging so that you can have a smaller battery on your vehicle, or if it's advanced battery technologies. There's some really cool stuff coming out of the universities that are advancing battery technology. They're being able to get denser and lighter. All right, so then moving on to the infrastructure deployment energy demand. This actually relates back to the first 2 items on the previous slide. Energy is a huge element of this entire thing to work, right? So the utilities, local jurisdictions, and the trucking industry, as well as the transit industry, needs to work together so we can streamline the permitting process, get the infrastructure in quicker, make sure that the utility upgrades can happen faster, because it really is important and a huge element of getting this infrastructure into the ground to be able to support kind of like the chicken and the egg question, right? If there's no infrastructure, people aren't going to buy the vehicles, and vice versa. And so ways we're thinking about doing that is obviously coordination, cross-coordination. SANDAG's not going to be able to do this alone. This is not something that SANDAG is going to be able to solve alone. We are not intending to solve it alone. We're trying to support the region and ensure the region is ready for these things. So we're going to be promoting public-private partnerships. We're looking at ways that SANDAG and other government agencies can be more nimble, or as nimble as government can possibly be, maybe, and looking at ways we can explore new business models, potentially streamline revenue sharing, and really support the private industry to be able to take this technology and commercialize it and let the free market do its thing. Lastly, we have education, outreach, and engagement. There's a spectrum of education, outreach, and engagement things we're looking at. ranging from just showcasing the technology, raising awareness with the owners and operators. There is definitely some skepticism left and still around about the technology, the trucks, and being able to charge. And so by showing the technology, collecting that data, and then sharing that with owners and operators, they're going to be more understanding and be able to apply that data to their business operations to see if it'll work or not. Raising awareness around regulations and incentive programs that are existing and will exist in the future is huge, so that folks can afford the vehicles and take advantage of those incentives. Working with the communities and fleets that these vehicles are going to be operating in is going to be huge. Diesel vehicles currently operate in some of the most underserved and disproportionately affected communities. And so making sure that we are working with those communities and the fleet operators to address equity and environmental justice concerns, as well as the energy delivery to those communities, so that we can ensure that there are cleaner trucks operating in those areas. It's going to be huge. And then the last thing is education throughout our entire education system, being able to ensure that the San Diego region can cultivate a workforce that is local and San Diegan, and not bringing folks from outside. We want to be able to have folks that can work in this industry and then bring additional investment, bring additional private industry money to the San Diego region. So this is that was the high level overview of the strategies here. As a quick overview of next steps, we brought the needs assessment and the citing criteria to y'all in April. We're talking about strategies today. That'll be wrapped into this draft blueprint this fall. We'll be bringing that back for discussion, and then finalizing the blueprint that late this winter and publishing in early 2024. And with that, that'll wrap up my presentation. Looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any public comments, Francisca?
Thank you, Chair. First up will be Tim Bilash, and Tim will be followed by Blair Beekman.
Hello again, committee. Tim Bilash, Hub in Delmar. Sorry to bore the committee again. I really don't like to make so many comments, but this is an area I'm not really too familiar with trying to learn about. And but I do pay some attention as being trained in science to the technology that's advancing rapidly. And the transportation needs need to be planned out long in advance, particularly the financing. And I can tell you here, being here in San Diego County 15 years, nobody wants to pay for anything that they use themselves. And they certainly don't want to pay for things that other people use, even if it helps the climate. But I am aware that newer batteries using sodium based technology in the last 2 years, and some promising things for biology-based batteries, biobatteries, need a lot of investment that we're not doing. And how to make that hand in hand with the plans for transportation that you have to reach out is quite a challenge. Now, for solar rooftop, my understanding is it generates DC current that gets converted to AC, that gets plugged into the grid, that gets stored by the potentially electric companies, that get rerouted across their big transmission lines back to my house, that gets converted back to my power pack that goes to my computer. And somehow in that seems to me a little inefficient. So why can't I plug my computer directly into the solar cells, or a small power battery for electronic devices, for instance, take the load off at night because I've stored a little bit of it. So it's not an all or nothing. And the issues that we don't look at are the economics. It really seems to me a travesty that the primary investors in advanced technologies are the fossil fuel companies, because they've made outrageous profits in the last 25 years using sequestered oil that dinosaurs perhaps, or fossil fuels, that's what we call it, made. And they get to mine it, and they charge us for the mining and the distribution systems. The sun is free. That electricity tends to be low cost, but they want us to pay for transportation systems of the electric grid. And there's some state plans that I'm confused. I think it was called REACT, was added to one of the bills. It's now a good bill on the state floor, and it was a bad bill before. I can't keep track. So I think we're a lot of at cross purposes, and I'd like to see the economics of profit in the different technologies that we want to produce. And undercarriage for buses are in Stockholm at the moment. I hope we have a pilot project coming on board this year to show the viability of charging these big buses at least as a carve out to demonstrate the feasibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Blair Beekman, who will be followed by the original draw.
Hi, thank you, Blair Beekman. Thank you again for allowing 3-minute public comment today. It's helped a lot. That was a really interesting, helpful public comment previously for myself. Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to thank the people for this item. They want to be open and hear suggestions from all sides. I'm really interested in how we can work in friendship and partnership with Mexico and the border and Tijuana and what is a growing large Tijuana region. Good luck in that work and those efforts of partnership. I think for me, a really important issue in dealing with the future of electric buses, I'm not the deepest guy in the world, but they just seem a really good project to be working on. And there's been some real hangups and snags in previous rollouts of electric bus programs that I don't quite know the depth of what they are. But I know that the VTA in Santa Clara County and San Jose, they're trying to address those hangups and problems that happen. They're starting their own rollout program of electric buses, and you know, from good, you know, solid activist community, there's some concerns, and I hope those concerns can be addressed. And good luck in how to do that in San Diego as well. With that, I hope the electric bus program can work really well. And it's with that, from the previous public comment, he made some really interesting comments that reminded me that in this electric future we're going towards, in all the work we try to do, I always try to mention that we have to be considering the work that is taken to, you know, create our electric grids and you know, the new minerals, the new special earth minerals that we use to do that, and really give a nod and respect and want to always be considering, you know, the contract rights and union rights of all the persons who are mining all that new rare earth material. We have to say that every time we talk about our electric future. I think that the work that people do to mine those sort of things and to make sure they have good contracts and that labor negotiations are always going well. I mean, in Africa right now, we're starting basically a new set of war between China, Russia, and the US. I think it's good labor relations and good practices like that that will bring concepts of peace to the process and give workers really good rights, to have good worker rights for those practices. It's really important that these sort of hand-in-hand ideas that I'm trying to learn how to better consider in how we talk about our issues. I don't like to be isolated in talking about our issues. There has to be a bigger scope in how we talk about things. Thank you. And of course,
Thank you. I'm sorry, Blair, your time has expired. Our next commenter is the original draw, and the original draw will be our last commenter on this item.
Man, it's terrifying to hear you guys talk about these kinds of things, because when you look at the bigger picture, it's like you'll never be able to go to zero emissions. I mean, we would have to stop breathing. Plants would have to stop living. And so it's not possible. And you talk about, you know, the economy and being able to be ready for this change. I mean, people are losing their livelihood. They can't even afford to live in a home, let alone pay for the SDG and e-bills that have gone up over 200% and continue to. So as we talk about going to electric, it's like, obviously you're in bed with SDG and E because they're going to benefit from this. And we already know that the power grid cannot handle all of this, but yet you are claiming that in, you know, the next maybe 12 years, you're going to be able to mitigate all of these things. Well, mining for cobalt and lithium, it's totally toxic to the environment and the people, and people shouldn't even be doing it. It should be machines doing it, yet they have people standing right there mining for this stuff that's completely toxic to not only the environment, but them. And then we have these batteries that you want to put in all of these vehicles that are not only toxic to the environment themselves, and you cannot recycle them, but they combust. And so what happens when you have a wreck on the road and every vehicle has a lithium battery that cannot be put out and that is on fire for days at a time, if not months? I mean, you need to have sand to put it out. There won't even be enough water to put that kind of a fire out, but you don't even have the charging stations, and you don't even have the agreements with the other states or nations in order for these people that live here in California that are going to have to drive an electric vehicle to be able to cross state lines. And just the efficiency of it is ridiculous, because how long does it take? You go home and you try like charge your car for 8 hours, and then what, you go to a mall and you maybe have to wait a couple of hours for it to charge. How long do you think it's going to take a bus and a semi truck to be able to charge and have that be convenient? It's like we talk about progress, and I'm like, how is this progress when we're going back to walking and biking and using public transit, when we should be, if it was progress, in spaceships, right? Shouldn't we be flying around, have cars that fly around? That's progress. But going backwards is not progress. And you're actually keeping people from, I mean, you could turn off these vehicles at the drop of a dime if you wanted to and decide where they go. So it's very terrifying to even think that, I mean, you'd have to get rid of all the gas stations. I mean, your plan is an impossible one to do. And like you said, even if you got rid of all the electric vehicles, that ain't going to put a dent in the climate. So why would you even put this initiative out and have a blueprint for it instead of finding ways that you will go to zero? Because everything you do is contradictory. You're going to want to spend so much money for this. Truck drivers aren't even going to be able to deliver food. But go ahead. It's a great way to keep people in a 15-minute city unable to travel because you can't even charge your car because it costs too much.
That concludes the public comments.
Any questions or comments from board members? Andy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I really want to thank you for all the work you've been doing outside in the community. It's not just been informational, but it's been a conversation with community members on something so complex and simplifying it and allowing them to share their concerns. So I just want to thank you for that. And so, you know, having my port commissioner hat and always talking about the maritime clean air strategy and our 100% ZEV goal by 2030 with 40% 2026, I want to dive in on the near strategies, which is if you can help me break down specifically on the companies. So the companies that are ready and willing to implement, you know, like to get the trucks, to implement the infrastructure, and who are carved out that's within the available technology and that range. So I wanted to know how we identify those companies, and is that list published? And on top of that, once that has been published, how we're working with community members to discuss the kind of themes that we heard at the last week's AB 617 meeting, which was safety and aesthetics. So if you can break down for me, because 2026 is coming soon. And so I'm just really curious on how we're identifying those companies, because I hear companies saying, I'm ready, I'm willing. I just don't know how that gets, if it gets lost or if it's what's going on. So if you can help me understand that.
Sure, that's a good question. We did when we did our needs assessment earlier this year, we identified the available makes and models from OEMs and charging infrastructure, and did a little bit of analysis to understand what the general costs of those vehicles are. So that's documented within our needs assessment. But I think you're right, we need to do a better job of pulling that information out and sharing that. I know the Energy Commission has a good website that shows some of the approved vendors and some of the approved makes and models. I think CARB has some of those as well. But as we look at developing resources and education components as a result of this blueprint, I think that'll be a huge element. SANDAG doesn't necessarily pick favorites as far as private industry goes. We're looking at supporting private industry in general. And so looking at providing a list of resources is a great idea. And I think something we need to pull out of this as a strategy near term.
And just to follow up on also two companies that operate either the border and the port, because I know there are some of them that, that are ready. So I just don't know what the list of those are. Like if you have that list as well.
As
that ready for the transition of their fleet.
Yeah, I know that there are a number of companies, tenants at the port, that are currently working on transitions. I think Terminal Lift is one of those, and they've actually started to go into OEM manufacturing themselves. There are other companies that have been testing out electric vehicles at the port. I know that there was a Nikola testing with Zucarmex at the Port of San Diego. And there are other companies we talked to in development of our white paper for cross-border goods movement and zero-emission vehicles. We talked to Toyota and got a better understanding of their vehicle transition plans. They're looking at a combination of hydrogen and battery electric vehicles. And so the list goes on. But I do think that it's an element that you raise is good. It's to kind of showcase that as part of that education outreach and engagement strategy, is showcasing the technologies that are available so that folks can really see what is happening on the ground and see the transitioning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other board members with any questions or comments? So Jeff, this is a topic that I could talk to you for a long time about, but I'll just draw to one. Is there any thinking of how we could incentivize or promote through a number of means electrification of medium and heavy duty trucks in the most impacted communities in our region? And by that, I mean the impacted communities are not just the portside communities, which we know they're heavily impacted, but also communities in Carlsbad, Encinitas, Oceanside, East County, in El Cajon, La Mesa, I think Lemon Grove's in there, and even Coronado. So we have pockets of pretty high concentrations of pollution. Are there some methodologies that we can employ so that we can get ahead of the statewide goals of electrification by 2045, but make it in near term like the portside community of 2032?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And one of the things that we're thinking about doing is targeting the low, moderate income households or owner operator locations, as well as the areas that are most affected by these diesel trucks and buses. And so I think as a near-term implementation strategy, we can look at incentives that are targeted at these communities that are most disproportionately affected by trucks and buses. And then longer term, looking at supporting the overall transition. But one of the things that we talked about when we developed this zero emission vehicle white paper, cross-border goods movement white paper, was that the larger companies, they understand that the smaller owner operators are challenged, and they are the ones that need the money first. And so they are looking to not necessarily gobble up all that money. At least the folks we talked to are not necessarily looking to gobble that money up. So looking to target those incentives to the smaller owner operators, the ones that need it the most, the ones that would not be able to have that capital up front in order to afford the infrastructure or the vehicles.
Any other? I'm sorry, Mayor Sanchez. Yeah.
I might just add that as part of that, like this siting criteria that we developed is helping us understand where truck flows are within the region. And part of this is looking at an assessment of potentially parcels that or sub areas within the region that would benefit from infrastructure. And we can also look at how that would also tie into vehicle incentives as well.
Sure.
No, I wanted to say that I was very proud of the Air Pollution Control District's decision to oppose the notion of giving more time for those kind of vehicles crossing the border into the United States and giving them a pass on this or giving them more time, right? But as something that's maybe parallel to this and really kind of highlighting how critical this is, I was wondering if there were any plans for cities to also be transitioning their fleets as a regional goal, because I don't feel that our city is moving very fast at all in this situation. The fleets, the trucks, which also need to happen. And I keep hearing, well, we don't have the infrastructure, but if we had, the technology, but if we had this as a regional goal, for all cities to be working together on this, maybe we'd get there faster. Just a thought.
I can, as part of the advanced clean fleet regulation, public fleets are required to transition their fleets as well. Historically, you're right, fleets have not had the same kind of incentives or investment behind it. And I've started to see a couple of grant opportunities coming out to just specific to public agency fleets. And I think that's something that we'll also need to look at within these strategies for supporting the public agencies to be able to convert their fleets, because right, it's a huge gap in the process.
I appreciate that. I've even been told or asked, well, what about the police, units? Can they go as fast if we went to that? Because certainly the patrol units are the ones that really move a lot within the city. But yeah, I think maybe a more aggressive, like, let's do this together kind of a thing, and not let like the city of Oceanside kind of take its time, getting there because of course, we're told.
Well, I can tell you
By
the city,
staff.
the city of
sorry, we're not
Lamesa,
there
its
yet.
next climate action plan is going to try to challenge the other cities to catch up with Lamesa. So we're
Catch up
working that.
with Lamesa, yeah.
So if we have a little competition between cities to move along those lines, I think it's a healthy competition to have, because the end result is not only do we have a healthier community with less cases of asthma and cancer, but actually there's a cost benefit, which was the other issue I was going to bring up to Jeff. So in listening to one of the ads from International Trucks, they were able to say that actually, even though the all-electric medium-sized truck that they're selling costs maybe 2 or maybe closer to 3 times more than their regular trucks, their diesel trucks, that in a 10-year span, it is actually more cost-effective. Has that been something that you can draw out and part of your education program?
Yeah, absolutely. And as part of that needs assessment, we did a market study and analysis and did find that, the total upfront, excuse me, I'll slow down here. The upfront cost of these vehicles and the infrastructure is more expensive, but long-term, there's less maintenance that's required and the total cost of ownership of these vehicles is lower. And I think that we're developing fact sheets as part of this blueprint effort, so we can include that information within those fact sheets.
Great, because I hope one of the strategies then is if we can show that it is cost effective for particularly these larger companies to make the transition, that we incentivize it by either paying the interest or some other upfront cost, because we know that's the initial cost is what's prohibitive. So if we break down that particular barrier, ultimately the company will save money and we'd have these electric EV vehicles on the road much sooner. I don't want to go any longer. Any other comments? Councilman Duncan.
Just very quickly, I can't recall, Jeff, I apologize. Were you at the SANDAG board, workshop that we did last Friday in the other room?
I was not, no.
Okay, so just briefly, I just want to make a brief comment because I agree in general and generally in specific with the concept of ensuring that, the underprivileged and the most harmed communities receive a significant amount of attention and funding on pollution issues and other services that we provide in studies and work that we do. But one thing that, and I made clear, and I asked the chair to make clear at that workshop, because there was a few different comments about air pollution, is that not only do we focus on those specific areas, but that we also focus on all of the areas that have significant issues, because if you exclude one, you're really excluding, solving the problem. So whether one place is, much, financially better off, potentially such as Coronado, and right next to it's Barrio Logan that bears a huge impact of the situation, just to keep that in mind, the balance. And she confirmed, yeah, these were, additional ideas that work together and come together. So I just wanted to mention that because I don't think you were there. And I know this isn't 100%, in your control or your area, but just something to keep in mind, because we have to solve the worst areas of the problem as well, ensuring the most damaged and underserved areas are helped.
I agree. And, air doesn't follow borders, right? So that's a huge part. And it's a regional issue. It's an inter-regional issue. It's a statewide issue. It's a national issue. It's an international issue. So that's kind of goes back to some of the strategies about, coordinating with your neighbors. I think it's a lot of coordination happening within the region, within our subregions, and then across state lines and county lines, international borders as well.
And just a brief comment, sort of add to exactly what you just said. For instance, the huge amount of sailors and other civilian employees that work in Coronado, probably over 90% of them do not live there, but they're there all day. Mm-hmm. And when there's an air problem there, it's obviously significantly a problem for them as well. So you make a good point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Raphael.
So my question is, you mentioned incentives for the portside communities that have the greatest impact. Is that specifically to fleets, or is that as an offset for the residents of those communities? I guess it was unclear what those incentives are for.
It's a good question. I think that it's a combination of community incentives and infrastructure within those communities to ensure that we're replacing vehicle miles traveled with clean vehicle miles traveled and not adding to vehicle miles traveled within those communities. but also for the owners and operators that are serving those communities. So, you know, if you have specific ideas for the communities themselves, I would love to hear that and think about how we can incorporate that in our strategy. But we are thinking about not only incentives for infrastructure and for the vehicles, but for how this transition can support communities as well. And so I'd love to follow that conversation up if you'd like to.
Thank you, Jeff. You know, the requirement from CARB to reduce EMT does include electrification as fast as we can. So I think overall we still have to reduce EMT. Any other comments from board members? If not, I had just a few final comments. I did get a request from Catherine Rhodes to speak, but I think it'll set bad precedents if I had you speak, Catherine. So I'm going to apologize and say you can't have it today, and next time we'll try to get you in. I have one last quick announcement, or actually something I meant to make this information known at the beginning of the meeting. There's a program currently airing on KPBS called Freeway Exit, hosted by Andrew Bowman. They're having an event on the 10th, I believe, at 11. You can go to the KPBS website to find out more information about that. I've listened to some of the episodes of this podcast, and it has a lot of, I think, great information for us with regards to transportation challenges that we'll all face in our region, in addition to a great article in the LA Times that came out a few days ago. So I just want to put in a plug for more homework that Councilman Duncan seems to keep note of, all the ones that are handing out. Any other comments before we close? If not, with that, the Transportation Committee meeting, the next one is scheduled for Friday, June 16th at 9. Have a nice weekend.